You had your chance to be somebody. Victor built something real, You had your chance to be somebody. Victor actually built something real, something worth having.
Good luck to both of you.
She had no idea that everything Victor had shown her that day wasn't actually his to give.
Marcus Reed had spent 6 years building a small renovation business from the ground up, one modest job at a time: kitchen remodels, deck repairs, the occasional bathroom renovation for neighbors who trusted his quiet, careful work more than flashy advertisements. He worked with his hands, came home covered in drywall dust more often than not, and never once apologized for it. His wife, Renee, had grown tired of that dust a long time ago. She wanted the version of success she saw online: mansions, private chauffeurs, weekend trips to places she couldn't pronounce correctly on the first try. Marcus loved her, deeply, patiently, the way people love something they still believe is worth waiting for. But waiting, Renee eventually decided, wasn't something she was interested in doing any longer. She met Victor Marsh at a networking event she'd talked her way into, a smooth-talking businessman who described himself as a private equity strategist specializing in real estate and luxury asset investment. He drove a black Rolls-Royce. He wore suits that fit like they'd been poured onto him. He spoke in numbers so large they stopped sounding real. Renee was captivated instantly. Within 4 months, she'd moved out of the modest house she shared with Marcus and into Victor's sprawling mansion on the other side of town, convinced she'd finally found the life she'd always deserved. The day she filed for divorce, Renee insisted on delivering the papers to Marcus in person, at his own house, with Victor standing beside her, and a moving truck parked at the curb collecting the last of her belongings. "Sign it, Marcus." "It's over," she said, shoving the papers into his dust-covered hands. Marcus, still in his work clothes after a long day on a renovation site, looked at the papers, then at the Rolls-Royce idling behind her, then at Victor's smug, satisfied expression. "You had your chance to be somebody," Renee said, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "Victor actually built something real. Something worth having." Marcus didn't argue. He signed the papers calmly, handed the pen back, and simply said, "Good luck to both of you." Renee laughed, triumphant, and turned back toward the car. What she didn't know, what nobody around her seemed to question, was how thin the foundation of Victor's empire truly was. Victor's mansion was heavily mortgaged. His Rolls-Royce was leased, not owned, the payments quietly overdue for 2 consecutive months. His private equity firm operated primarily on new investor deposits used to pay returns to earlier investors, a fragile, familiar pattern that inevitably collapses the moment new money stops flowing in fast enough. Victor had built an illusion, and Renee had walked directly into it, mistaking rented luxury for real success. Marcus, for his part, didn't spiral into bitterness after the divorce. He simply kept working, quietly channeling his heartbreak into longer hours and sharper focus. 6 months later, the city announced a major renovation contract, restoring a row of historic downtown buildings slated for demolition unless a contractor could complete the work under a tight budget and an even tighter deadline. Every major construction firm in the city submitted competitive bids. Marcus submitted one too, modest, detailed, and refreshingly honest about both the challenges and the realistic timeline required. To everyone's surprise, including his own, Marcus won the contract. He worked relentlessly over the following months, hiring a small, dedicated crew, personally overseeing every restored doorway, every repaired brick facade. When the project finished 2 weeks ahead of schedule and under budget, local news outlets took notice. A modest renovation contractor who'd quietly outworked the city's biggest firms made for a compelling story. Contracts poured in after that. Marcus expanded carefully, hiring more crews, taking only projects he genuinely believed in, refusing to overextend the way larger firms often did. Within a year, Reed Renovations had become one of the most respected construction firms in the region, built entirely on reputation, quality, and honest, unglamorous work. He never sought public attention. He simply built, one honest project at a time, the same way he always had. Meanwhile, cracks were beginning to show in Victor's carefully constructed world. New investor deposits slowed as market conditions shifted, and without fresh capital flowing in, Victor could no longer pay the returns he'd promised earlier investors. Rumors began circulating quietly among his clients, then loudly, then publicly. Renee noticed the change first in small ways: Victor's growing irritability, hushed phone calls behind closed doors, unopened mail piling up on the kitchen counter. When she finally asked him directly what was happening, his answer was vague, dismissive, unconvincing. 3 months later, federal investigators opened a formal inquiry into Victor Marsh's investment practices. Within weeks, the mansion was seized pending litigation. The leased Rolls-Royce was repossessed directly from the driveway, the same driveway where Renee had once triumphantly waved goodbye to Marcus. Victor's assets were frozen. His business collapsed entirely within a single devastating month, taking with it every promise he'd ever made to Renee about the life they'd build together. Renee found herself standing outside that same seized mansion on a quiet afternoon, watching movers, court-appointed this time, load boxes into a plain, unmarked truck instead of a Rolls-Royce. She had nowhere left to go. No savings of her own, having relied entirely on Victor's illusion of wealth. No mansion. No chauffeur. No Victor, who had already stopped returning her calls 3 days earlier, quietly disappearing to avoid the mounting legal fallout entirely on his own. Renee reached out to Marcus nearly a year after their divorce had been finalized, hesitant, uncertain whether he'd even respond. To her surprise, he agreed to meet her at a quiet cafe downtown, the same modest kind of place they used to visit early in their marriage, long before Victor's world had ever entered either of their lives. "I don't know what I expected," Renee admitted, staring down at her coffee cup, unable to meet his eyes at first. "I thought I was choosing something better." Marcus studied her for a long moment, no bitterness in his expression, only quiet, hard-earned peace. "You chose what looked better, Renee. There's a difference." "I know that now," she said softly. "I'm sorry, Marcus. For everything I said that day. For not seeing what was actually in front of me." Marcus nodded slowly. "I forgive you, Renee. I mean that. But I built something real over this past year, something I'm proud of, brick by honest brick. I'm not interested in tearing that down by reopening old doors." Renee's eyes filled with tears, understanding fully, finally, what she'd truly lost that day on the street. "You deserve everything good that's coming to you, Marcus. I mean that." "I know," he said gently, standing to leave a generous tip on the table. "I finally believe that myself now too." He walked out of that cafe the same way he'd walked away from their old front porch nearly a year earlier, calm, composed, and completely unshaken by the wreckage of what once was. Reed Renovations continued expanding steadily over the following years, eventually becoming one of the most trusted names in sustainable, community-focused construction across the entire region. Marcus never chased flash or spectacle. He built quietly, honestly, one genuine project at a time, exactly the way he always had. Renee, meanwhile, slowly rebuilt her own life from the ground up, starting an entry-level position at a local nonprofit, determined this time to build something that belonged entirely to her, without borrowed shine or rented illusion propping it up. She never remarried. She kept, instead, a small framed photo from years earlier, a modest house, an honest man in work clothes, a life she hadn't recognized as valuable until it was already gone. Sometimes the flashiest cars carry the emptiest promises, and sometimes the quietest, dust-covered hands are building something far more lasting than anyone standing on the sidelines could ever fully see.